I don't know if you folks know this, but tomorrow is my birthday. I'm going to be 69. Nobody thought I was going to make it this long. So it got me thinking, I was thinking about my life and how I got here. I mean, the wild road that led me here. And the more I looked at it, as wild as it seemed and all the different offshoots I've done, I'm as far this way as being a stockbroker and selling insurance, and as far this way as playing music and being a hobo, and there actually was some direction to the whole thing in ways that if I didn't look at it, I wouldn't see. When I was around 18 years old, I got involved in Native American ceremonies. So I was already digging into the spiritual then. In my early 20s, I got into self-help workshops. Did a lot of them. Did one called EST, my first one in New York. I think they call it Landmark now. Well, when I did it, the first day they put you in the room, they locked the doors for 12 hours and said, you don't get to go to the bathroom. This was at a time when I had ulcerative colitis and was going to the bathroom about 16 times a day. So when those doors locked, talk about panic. But I learned I'm not my body. I learned that there's something more. And I took a couple other workshops. I went through this thing called actualizations, which I loved. And then there was this is all when I was in New York City. And there was this thing in Boston called relationships. And I took that because I was in a relationship at the time and wanted it to be better. I mean, you'd think I would have learned something, but no, I went through 3 divorces anyway. But I took this workshop and I loved it, so the girl I was dating at the time, I said, hey, why don't you take this workshop? I'll come up and I'll just support. And so she signs up for the workshop. We go to Boston and I tell them, I'm just here to support whatever you guys need. And they're like, we don't know you, so we'll let you be a gopher. And so on Friday night, I was the gopher. Whatever they came out of the room and said they need this, I went and got it. I went and got it. I went and got it. At some point, the person at the door who was watching the outside of the door said, I need a break. Will you watch the door for me? So I went from being a gopher to now being the outside door guard. Well, at some point, something happened inside the room, and now they needed me to be the inside door guard. And now I'm inside the room. The next thing that happened, this is when I was 22. The next thing that happened on that same weekend was something went wrong with the sound system and asked if anybody knew how to fix it. So now I'm doing sound. Once they realized I could do sound and they started to see my energy and what I brought to the room, because I was just there to serve. I wasn't there, for any other reason except to be of service. They said, listen, we actually need somebody to take charge of the room when we're on breaks to get it back in order for the next session. Would you do that? Now I'm in charge of the inside room. This is all in the same weekend. Then, on Sunday morning, the last day, they come in and go, is anybody here a masseuse? Because the workshop leader is having trouble with his neck and shoulders. And that was one of the 97 jobs I've done. So now I'm up being the masseuse on the workshop leader, and we're talking. And he finds out I'm telling him how I'm a musician, and I've been working on doing a musical workshop. And he says, well, do you have one of those ideas in mind that you could do with our group? And so I explained it to him. He said, that's great. Why don't you go and do that next? And he looked at the people in the room and said, he's going to do the next section of the workshop. And they all looked at him and looked at me, and they really couldn't understand what was going on. And now I'm on stage. My girlfriend's out there, and I'm on stage. And led this workshop, and the room just exploded. I mean, it was great. It went fantastic. I'm 22 years old, and I just led the 250 people through a process that up to this point I'd only been thinking about, had no idea if it could really work, and here it was, and everybody's now singing, "To know your love is to know who I am," after they had sung it into each other's eyes in these smaller groups. It was incredible. And now I was 22 at the time. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because as far as I'm concerned, I didn't really get it until I was in a cabin in the woods at 55. That's 20 years later. That's more than 20 years later. And I met with somebody on Monday who came up to me and said, how come we can't have a 6-week workshop where after that they're simply enlightened? And I'm here to tell you that what you could get out of a 6-week class, what you get out of these classes, is you get a sense of, in the beginning, right, of a different you and a different way to apply principle in life so that you can then have a better quality of life. That's the beginning of it. And maybe you get to have in that class, that first class, an experience of oneness, maybe. But then that enlightenment moment, that God moment that I've had it so many times in my life at this point, right? Where I've actually disappeared, where I was so in the oneness that I didn't exist. Until after, when I come back and I go, wow, what was that? And we go and we take these workshops, or we drop acid, or we have these moments. We get deep into meditation and have these moments, and we get to have these moments. But if you've noticed, then that moment disappears, and then you're back in the drama of the day, whatever's going on in your life. And then you got to ask yourself, as my wife and I do with each other, how enlightened are you now? And so sure, within 6 weeks, you could have a God moment. You could have a moment. But then is life. Because you're not, unless you're in a monastery, you're not sitting there in meditation going on and on and on and on. You're involved and engaged in your everyday lives, no? And so being engaged in your everyday life, how do you bring it in then? And that's what we teach here. How to bring it in then. So sure, in my 20s, I had all these amazing experiences, but I also noticed that as I moved away, like when I stopped doing those rituals, those Native American rituals, they weren't regular in my life. When I stopped being engaged in the workshops because it wasn't every day, that what slowly started to happen is I fell back into whatever I believed myself to be at the time. I mean, in those moments, I'm like, wow, I'm a God being. I'm a powerful, creative, spiritual being. I get it. And then all of a sudden, I'm facing, getting fired from a job or being booed off a stage, which I have experienced. Ain't that fun? Or being sick and in the hospital, or being anxious. I was such an anxious guy in my 20s and 30s and 40s. I was so anxious all the time about everything. I don't experience that anymore, but that's only because I practiced. I kept at it. Day in, day out. Practice. Keep pushing the envelope. I've told you that one of my superpowers is that I'm simply relentless. And I wanted to get over my anxiety. I wanted to have a job, a position that I loved. I didn't want to settle for something that a lot of people settle for where it's okay, but I don't love it. I wanted a life that I loved and have been relentless in that pursuit, and that has been the thread in my life. But it takes the constant relentlessness of willing to face with courage those situations that are not it. I read this book once that talked about the 10 things that get in your way of truly having the life of your dreams. And the most interesting one was number 10, right? They all worked up, all the things about self-esteem and whether you got the courage and this and that. But number 10 was the one that was most interesting to me, and it was opportunity. It said the thing that can get in your way of your dreams the most is actually opportunity, because the opportunity looks really good. And so you might leap at that because it's a good opportunity. And how can you pass on a good opportunity? Anybody in their right mind wouldn't pass on a good opportunity. And then you're in that opportunity for 10, 20, 30 years. And what happened? Our willingness to be brave and stand in who we truly are, what our true dream is. But then what's your true dream? What is that? Well, that takes practice too. Being in touch with yourself to a level at which you can see what it is that is really drawing you forward. There was a time I thought my dream was being a rock and roll star. That was what I thought my dream was. But it wasn't until I was actually in the mix of it, in the industry, having record executives come around, being at these parties and all this, and being around so many other crazy, wild musicians, that I realized this isn't the life I want at all. But then I had that push-pull of opportunity, right? I'd worked so hard to get there, to get in that mix, to be at that level, to be hanging out with these people, to have record company executives coming and putting out lines of cocaine and going, snort this and sign here on the dotted line. I had that. And I said, no. And everybody thought I was nuts. How can you say no? You just got offered what you've been going after all this time. But at that moment, in that moment, when it would have been so easy to move forward and go, okay. I didn't. You get the visual? And so sometimes it takes a lot of different steps forward to recognize these are dead ends. This isn't the door I actually wanted, but you got to be at the door to see it. You know what I'm saying? You can think about it from here to doomsday, but sometimes you actually got to be at the door. You got to take a look to really understand what it means to walk through and be in that life, to be that person. The other thing I notice about myself from when I'm 20s is that who I thought I was, what I thought was important has changed so dramatically. And when I was in my 20s and 30s, the things I held as important turns out at this point in my life to have been fun stuff, but not really the heart and soul of life for me. And so what I was thinking about was, That's what I want for you. I want you to know in your heart and soul what is yours. Because I noticed that people come to the center for basically only 3 reasons. You show up because you want connection. You want to connect with like-minded folks. That's one reason people show up here. Another reason is that their lives they're lost. Their lives are just not happening. They're unhappy as all get out. And we're their last resort on trying to figure out how to figure that out. And so they step in here in the hopes that you gain something that will allow your quality of life to rise. And then the third is actually your life's going along pretty well, and what you're looking for is something that can feed the world, contribute larger than yourself. And when it comes to connection, I mean, we saw it last night, Friday night at the pledge dinner, folks connecting because we're nice people. We're easy to connect with. This is a really easy place to connect. I find it that way. I'm really glad to be here connecting with all of you because I find you easy to connect with. So that part really works. What I notice about the folks who show up whose lives are not working about great is they take some classes, their lives start taking off, and then about 50% of them go, oh, that's all I needed, that's why I'm here, goodbye. And they're gone. And they miss out on all the rest that's possible here. And then for you folks who are here because you want to do better work in the world, want to see how to contribute in even larger and larger ways, I'm here to tell you that there's no better way to contribute to the world than awaken yourself. Because once you are awakened with that mindset of wanting to contribute to the world, you come up with creative ideas that have never happened before, that have never showed up before in the world. That happens all the time. How do we contribute? Well, the best way is get creative. And each of you, at whatever age you're at, has that ability to rise to something greater than where you have thought before. So 6 weeks? I don't think so. In 6 weeks, you can have an experience, but then it takes a lifetime of practice to really work through. And so I recommend starting as soon as possible. And if you're in it, keep practicing because that's what it takes. That's what it's taken me. I have a vision of, we sing this song when it's Ash and mine, we play with the band. The song is There Is Only One. And the words are, we are the light that shines for all to see. We come together and hold our lanterns high. We are the ones who take the lead so anyone can know the truth. And that is my vision. What has happened in the world is a continuation of rectifying, fixing what we think is broken. When our tenet here is transformation does not rectify, it transmutes. It's something larger, something we haven't seen before. A transmutation is something brand spanking new. And my vision is that we create, through all these different centers for spiritual living, people who are awakening to a new level of transformation in their own lives, thus affecting the lives around them, thus affecting the lives around those. And in that way, we can actually change the world. Instead of simply continuing to rectify what's been going on for 100,000 years in terms of people hating each other, in terms of right and wrong, and people deciding what's good and bad, and what's needed next to fix this, and all the things that go on in the world. There's something new that's possible to arise. I have dedicated my life to pushing the envelope. Not always in the best of ways. But now it has come around to where it is here. We're doing things in this center that have never been done before. We have this thing here called shared leadership, and we don't know what we're doing. And yet we continue. That's right. But we continually awaken to new ideas, new creativity in developing it. And so we're doing it without really knowing, where we're headed with it. We're doing better with it all the time. For me, being on the leading edge of what leadership can look like in the world, to start with it here, is extraordinary. For me, it's like I've hit the pinnacle of my life just being here as a participant in this. We put on this pledge dinner, right? And so it was my idea to do the pledge dinner. But then all these people in your community got sparked by it. And before you knew it, you had all these people making food for it. You had all these people setting up tables for it. You had everybody getting around the idea of this is going to be an extraordinary event. And then it was. And all I did was come up with the idea. Really, it's like if it wasn't for the shared leadership, if it wasn't for people stepping up in the kind of ownership, the kind of taking on what's possible here, it could have never been the event it was. It was beautiful. And it was an example of what's possible in everything we do here. Plus, it's an example of what's possible for what you can do in your life. What you can do in your life when we get in that awakened state. When we're willing to keep practicing. That's why after every class ends, another class starts. Because that's what it takes. And it's still, in that, takes years. So a buddy of mine, Vaughn, who's one of the folks here, was in a karate competition. And I've been thinking about the belts in terms of consciousness. So I came up with this idea of how the belts work in terms of consciousness. Because I think it's important that you can look at your life and go, where am I in this? How far have I gone in this? What is going on here? Recognizing that awake, right, the goal, the side effects are you're not worried, you trust in life, you're of service, you're loving, you're kind. These are the side effects of being awake. So you can recognize when you're there and when you're not. I can, right? If I'm not being kind, if I'm concerned about something, if I'm worried, which I don't do very much anymore, but a little bit. And so the white belt, right? The white belt is when you walk in for the first time. Anybody can be a white belt. Simply walking in the door, you're a white belt. Just here for the first time, you're here for a while, you're a white belt. If you come in and that's what you're doing, it's Sundays for you and you just want to hear this stuff and you want it to sink in, right? A yellow belt is when you start to read a little bit. Maybe take your first class, but you're studying. You're not yet practicing so much. It doesn't take a lot to be a yellow belt. Takes a little. And maybe in the yellow belt, because it's still not a white belt anymore, you've moved up, maybe your quality of your life is beginning to improve a touch. And the belts continue, right? And then I thought of first degree black belt. And I think first degree black belt is when you on a consistent basis, and the word here is consistent, understand when you are awake or not, and when a situation happens, turn your attention to awakening. That to be a black belt, you have to consistently, whatever the situation, turn your attention back to awakening and not be concerned about the situation. That's a black belt, first-degree black belt. A second-degree black belt is somebody who's doing that within hours, almost every time. A third-degree black belt is now doing that within minutes of no matter what the circumstance. I find myself somewhere between the second and third belt. I haven't made it to that third belt yet, so I can't even tell you what the fourth belt is. I would imagine, because I've never met anybody yet who's like lives in that fourth belt. I have not had yet that experience, but I know it exists as a possibility in my mind, right? Because that's how it works. We have these possibilities in our mind. And so notice where you are on the journey. It doesn't matter as long as you notice, as long as you're willing to keep in the work, because there it is. No matter what the circumstance, the goal is awakening. And from that awakened place, creativity flies. New things occur that you never thought of before. Your life becomes this creative miracle. In the midst of any circumstance, your life can be a creative miracle. Imagine that. Take that in. No matter what happens in your life can be, with your support, a creative miracle. That's what's possible in this teaching. And that's what I bring to you today. Thank you. I love you.